Hello and welcome back to another season of 10-Minute Concert Insights, Schubert Club's version of the pre-concert lecture. My name is Mark Bilyeu and I'm just so pleased to be here with you for another year of outstanding music. The Schubert Club is bringing us an amazing gift to launch this season, a two-part recital series of pianist Jean-Efflam Bavouzet playing the complete solo piano works of Maurice Ravel. This comes hot on the heels of Bavouzet's recent recording on the Chandos label, which Gramophone called delectable and indispensable, describing Bavouzet as a pianist who tints sound like a painter might harmonize pigment. It's a surprising fact that Ravel, who was admitted to the Paris Conservatory as a pianist, was actually not able to play a lot of the music he composed. Or at least he was very selective about the music he did choose to perform in public. In 1928, at the age of 53, Ravel made a trip to America, and after some time in New York, here's a photo of him from that trip with the likes of Eva Gautier and George Gershwin. He took an overnight train to Chicago, where he conducted the Chicago Symphony, and then attended a concert of his chamber music, on which he also performed. The review from the Chicago Herald and Examiner is hilarious. They said, "Only a supreme ironist would consent to play his own beautiful music in public as badly as Ravel plays it. He plays even worse than Johannes Brahms did in his declining years, and Brahms set a mark for all bad pianists to shoot at. However, it is a tradition that composers play badly, and no one can complain that Ravel does not respect it." It actually doesn't matter how good or bad of a pianist Ravel was. He understood the piano, he loved the piano, and ultimately, as we'll experience in these recitals, he transformed the piano with his visionary artistry, which is more than we can say for that Chicago critic nobody remembers. Ravel entered the Paris Conservatory with the Spanish-born pianist Ricardo Viñas, who would become both a close friend and a major champion of Ravel's work. They were a slightly odd pair, with Ravel the hyper-put-together composer some might now identify as type A, and the virtuoso pianist from Catalonia, who Francis Poulenc described as some kind of strange hidalgo with an enormous mustache, a brown sombrero in true Barcelona style, and button boots with which he used to kick me in the shins whenever I was clumsy at the pedals. But the relationship just worked. Now, Viñas would go on to premiere many pivotal works for Ravel, all heard on these two programs: the Pavane for a Dead Princess, Jeux, Miroir, and Gaspard de la Nuit. You might recognize Ravel's Pavane for a Dead Princess from the orchestrated version Ravel made 10 years after the solo piano version was premiered. It's the piece that first put a 24-year-old Ravel, no longer a student but not yet a professional, on the map. Although he had been dismissed from the piano program at the conservatory, he was allowed to attend composition classes with his teacher, Gabriel Fauré. The title is admittedly a little provocative. Ravel himself described it as an evocation of a pavane that a little princess might, in former times, have danced at the Spanish court. Sometimes, interpretations have focused on the dead component of the title, rendering it a near dirge. Ravel was quick to remind the pianist Charles Ullmann that the title was Pavane for a Dead Princess and not Dead Pavane for a Princess. And when the composer-conductor Manuel Lida Tedesco, pictured in that Ravel birthday photo in New York in 1928, asked him how he arrived at the title, Ravel smiled and replied, "Do not be surprised, that title has nothing to do with the composition. I simply liked the sound of those words and put them there. C'est tout." This work has, for better or worse, become part of the greatest hits of classical music catalog. And aside from Ravel's original iterations, you can hear arrangements of this by all sorts of artists. My personal favorite, which I cannot recommend highly enough, is by the all-female synthesizer quartet Hello Wendy on their 2018 debut album. Would recommend. Jeux was written in 1901, before Vignes gave the premiere of the Pavane in 1902. And the two works could not be more different. Where the Pavane gives a little Fauré is my teacher vibes, Jeux, which is translated to water fountains or literally water games, is giving I was asked to leave the Paris Conservatory, and all I have to show for it is this abundance of inspiration and an entirely new era of keyboard music. Ravel found inspiration in a poem from his friend, Henri de Renier, which begins, "River God, laughing at the water that tickles him." De Renier actually inscribed it on the earliest autograph of the piece. Jeux, wrote Ravel, is at the origin of the pianistic novelties which one would notice in my work. This piece, inspired by the noise of water and by the musical sounds which make one hear the sprays of water, the cascades and the brooks, is based on two motives in the manner of a movement of a sonata, without, however, subjecting itself to the classical tonal plan. Ravel gave the work its first private performance for a group of artists known as les apaches, or the hoodlums. At the time, the term was widely used by the media as an epithet for street gangs and was jokingly coined by the Union of Artists to describe their highly modernistic output alongside the raucous gatherings. Les apaches met every Saturday after the evening's concerts had concluded, and they shared new music, they read poems, and discussed current events into the wee hours. One of the members, who heard Ravel's rendering of his new work, Jeux, recounted, "There was a strange fire, a whole panoply of subtleties and vibrations which none of us could previously have imagined." Camille Saint-Saëns, too stodgy and institutional for Les Apaches, heard the work at the public premiere and hated it, calling it a total cacophony. Although Les Apaches was an ever-changing group of folks, it was Ravel, Vignes, and the writer Michel Cavalcaresi who were the official leaders, or unofficial, as it were. In 1905, Ravel crafted his 5-movement set Miroir and dedicated each movement to a different member. Now, the final work of Ravel's that Vignes premiered, and the work Vignes was possibly most responsible for, is the 3-movement tour de force, Gaspard de la Nuit. When Vignes and Ravel entered the Paris Conservatory at the same time, Vignes knew no French, but he rapidly taught himself, memorizing large portions of French literature and translations of Edgar Allan Poe, his favorite. He gifted Ravel the 1842 publication by Aloysius Bertrand entitled Gaspard de la Nuit, and it immediately grabbed Ravel. Now, remember, this is the same guy who wrote an entire suite based on Mother Goose. Ravel loved fairy tales and the supernatural. In the preface to the anthology, Bertrand tells a story of how a mysterious man gave him the stories contained, and how that mysterious man received the book from a Mr. Gaspard de la Nuit, who we learn resides in hell. If Mr. Gaspard de la Nuit is in hell, may he roast there, retorted Bertrand in his own made-up preface. I shall publish his book. And thus, one heck of an unsettling literary anthology was born. Ravel pulled 3 poems as inspiration for each of his 3 movements, setting out, as he stated, to say with notes what a poet expresses with words. And that meant for Ravel, in this project, crafting something of the utmost difficulty. He actually set out to write something more demanding than the infamous Islamé by Balakirev. I love this quote from Ravel during his creative process. He said, "Gaspard has been a devil incoming, but that is only logical since he is the author of the poems." The 3rd and final movement is where Ravel's goal of creating devilishly virtuosic demands is most apparent. Scarbo is a small goblin-like creature who haunts us in our bedrooms once we are tucked in. He flits from corner to corner, scratching walls, hiding in curtains, and casting those creepy shadows we tell ourselves are just the trees outside. Now, even if you've never heard Scarbo before, my guess is that you might already know a little bit of it. So, have you ever been in downtown Minneapolis near 10th and Marquette, perhaps trying to find parking for an orchestra concert, or simply just trying to get onto 35W and noticed this mural? This iconic 5-story public art piece is, in fact, part of Ravel's Scarbo. Turns out that in 1972, columnist for the Minneapolis Star, Barbara Flanagan, wrote a piece calling on the owners of the building, Schmidt Music Company, to beautify the wall. She wrote, "Bob Schmidt knows he owns an ugly wall on the Marquette side of his store. Schmidt is perplexed about what to do with it. How about painting some big and colorful musical notes on the wall? Use the Minnesota Rouser, the national anthem, Downtown, Beethoven's Fifth, or a few bars of By the Waters of Minnetonka. The point is, Mr. Schmidt, to make that wall sing." Well, Schmidt Music didn't choose the Minnesota Rouser or the national anthem. They chose a virtuosic showpiece depicting a creepy goblin. Genius. The wall went viral before going viral was even a thing, with this famous 1977 photo of Van Cliburn and a Steinway in front of it. And then, of course, the very first press photos of Prince were also taken on that same year. Fun fact about this mural is that the measures are not actually contiguous to the original score. As you can see here, they chose to duplicate several measures for the visual effect rather than the fidelity of the score. So the next time you're stuck in traffic, turn on that new Jean-Efflam Ravel recording, but don't look too closely at the score on the wall. The music and the influence of Ravel is all around us. What a gift it is to have the opportunity to experience Ravel's entire catalog in the hands of Jean-Efflam Bavouzet. As Jean-Efflam wrote, our admiration for this musical giant, for his intelligence and elegant style of writing, for his perfect proportions, give way to a wave of emotion that is difficult to contain. I'm so looking forward to this unique offering, another incredible program here at the Schubert Club. We'll see you next time.